everyone, and welcome back to the Museum Show and Tell Show. My name's Nicole. I'm from the Penetanguishene Museum, and I'm here with Genevieve from the Huronia Museum.
Hello.
And if you're new to our show that we do every week, one of us picks a theme, and then we both try to find an artifact that relates to that theme and show it in our weekly Museum Show and Tell show. So today, Genevieve had challenged the Penetanguishene Museum to find an artifact that starts with the letter O. So would you like to show us what your artifact is, Genevieve?
I sure would. So hidden here behind my big head is some original group of 7 art. And this is our most recent acquisition. I thought I would show it off. It's not so recent that probably a number of you haven't seen it. We did acquire it before the pandemic, but things have been pretty slow. So for any of you that have been living under a rock, I will tell you a little bit about the group of 7. They were a Canadian art movement, and they rejected the 19th century approach to landscape art, which was largely imitative. What they wanted to do, and they were highly influenced by a lot of European art movements like post-impressionism, post-expressionism, and fauvism. They wanted to express the Canadian landscape, which they thought was really raw and wild. They wanted to express it in a very emotional way. So what we have here is a painting by Arthur Lismer. It's called September Haze, Georgian Bay Rocks. And what I think is really interesting is that it seems to be a kind of almost a sketch, like a pre-painting. You can see in some places, like right here, the paint doesn't entirely cover the wooden backboard. It's almost like he was floating by the Georgian Bay landscape, and he just caught this scene really quickly, sort of like a sketch with paints. And it is very, very distinctive for any of you who have traveled on Georgian Bay. You can see the rocks, the sumac just starting to turn, those windswept, very distinctive trees. I like the clouds that are fluttering by. And I feel really silly admitting this, but for some reason, and this is, you know, a very 20th century thought, but I thought that was a telephone pole. It isn't. But that's what I thought. And what's also really interesting about this piece of art is its history, its provenience. This was actually given to a woman, Jane Widdicombe, who was a secretary of Northrop Frye. And Northrop Frye in 1937, he had married a woman named Helen Kemp. Helen Kemp was a protege at the Art Gallery of Ontario. She was a protege of Arthur Lismer. Arthur Lismer, although he was obviously a member of the group of 7, he was a promoter of art education in Canada. So he worked at the Art Gallery of Ontario in the department, and I don't know what department it was actually, but he was a leading figure in art education. So he hired Helen Kemp, who was interested in that field as well. They married, and eventually the piece went from Northrop Frye to his secretary, Jane Widdicombe, and a few years ago, she donated it to the museum. She thought it would be an appropriate place to have Georgian Bay scenery on exhibit. So I think it's an appropriate place as well because of the educational, I guess, reason for the existence of museums. So thank you very much. And here is the last glimpse of our original group of 7 paintings. one of the few that we've got here at the museum.
That is
So how about you, Nicole?
really great use of the letter O is original piece, and that is very impressive piece to have in your collection. And yes, I'm very jealous. And I remember when I heard you had it, and I did come over right away to take a look at it after you did your announcement about having that. That whole art section you have at the Huronia Museum is really interesting for art in Ontario and in Canada, and everybody should come and take a look at it.
Yeah, we're really
question. So it's not a telephone pole. What is it?
It's just a tree it's just a dead tree.
Okay.
Sorry.
Because as soon as you said telephone pole, that's all I could see. And so then I'm like, oh, what is it supposed to be? I don't know. All right, so for our artifact, when we went with the letter O, we went pretty literal with an artifact that started with O. And I'm right beside right now, we went with an oven. But this is quite a large oven that we have here. And this was manufactured at the Spencer Foundry that was here in Penetanguishene. And it's used in lumber mills, which is also, you know, one of our focuses here at our museum too. So the Spencer Foundry actually started off as the Dominion Stove Foundry, and it was down on the waterfront off of, you know, Fox Street, and it opened in 1913, and it built stoves and boilers. And then the company in the late 1920s, early 1930s was changed names to the Spencer Foundry. And then in 1944, it changed once again over to the Beatty Brothers stove. And I think a lot of people around here might have remembered when we had the Beatty Brothers stove foundry here in Penetanguishene. So this particular one was actually donated by a family who had a cottage on Georgian Bay. And they had originally purchased it from a lumber camp. And they used it in their cottage for over 80 years because it was a cottage. And then they donated in 2018. So it's also a fairly recent artifact for us as well. And when we talk about lumber camps, not really sure because it had been in the family for over 80 years, which lumber camp, but it would be interesting to know it was probably, you know, one of our local camps that we have here because it wasn't too far from the Georgian Bay cottage that they did purchase this stove here. Stove, oven, okay, maybe I was playing with the words a little bit because it's really more and I do have a few pictures of, you know, our Beck Camp lumber camp, what it would have, you know, looked like. And this is probably more turn the century, although the lumber camps did not really change over the years. And the cook, you know, in your lumber camp was a very important person because, you know, everybody needed to get fed. And that was probably the only breaks they really had in their day. Here is another picture of the cook from the Beck lumber camps. Each camp would employ at least one cook, maybe more. And they usually would give them porks and beans and mustard and cloves and cinnamon and syrup and bread. And they didn't really have too much variety, but that's because they were up there, you know, the whole entire winter cutting everything down. I've got a picture here of the foundry that was down on Fox Street. And then I also have more pictures. This is another lumber camp picture. This is not the Beck Company one, so this is a different one, but you can see very, very similar. And unfortunately, there is no age on this one, but it does look a little bit later on than the photo that I have of the Beck one. And then I've got another photo here of, this was when it was the Beatty Brothers stove factory. And this is like a group photo that we have from the 1950s. But this was just, we're still trying, you know, whenever you get artifacts, sometimes you're just never done when it comes to researching them and finding information about them. And there is some great information here on it about that definitely came from the Penetang. It was a foundry. It's got the make not model on it and the number on it. And it's just really a great, interesting artifact to see in our collection, in our lumbering era, to really bring you back to what it had been like, you know, at that time and how these were used. And I am shocked at like how well it was kept at the cottage. But as we know, with most museums, a lot of times when people go through and look at all your old things, they remember them more from their cottages than anywhere else. Yeah. Because I think, you know, the cottages was getting back to, you know, the simple elements in life, and all of those older items, like something like this, it was made so well. It would have withstand, you know, so much. You just didn't ever, you know, plug it into anything, right? So, and you didn't really need that up at your cottage. And so I think that's why it was used so long at cottages. But it is, you know, an interesting artifact. You can obviously close this. And that is it closed here. And then on top, it's got the cook stoves, and there's at least 6 spots for cook stoves at the top. Ah. And it's very heavy, and you know, can't really move that, but you can open that up, and that's where you would have your heat source would be at the bottom there. So that is my artifact for today.
That's wonderful.
I mean, that's what I like when we do like the letters, because we both come up with things that are very, very different on, you know,
yes,
artifacts show. Whereas, you know, last week when we kind of came up with the same theme, and we
the first time.
So next week is I get to pick the theme. And of course, I like to look at what, you know, what's going on, you know, around us, everything. I thought, well, next week is starting with Easter. And, you know, Easter is usually when you would get, you know, a nice new hat, you know, an Easter bonnet. So I was just wondering if maybe we could go into our collections and see if we have any interesting hats.
Okay.
I hope we've done that before, but I have a hat that we haven't shown off. So
okay.
I'm now thinking, like, have we done this theme before? But
I don't know.
Who knows, you know? 71. So this is our 70th episode, and next week will be
oh my goodness.
Do the hats one. It's going to be our 71st. So, but that's the thing, is we can replay the themes, and we're still going to come with a different artifact every time. So we just have so much in our collection, correct?
We do. Hundreds of thousands of artifacts.
Yeah. All right. So we'll see you all next week then. All right.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Have a good weekend.